First weekend in November, this is when championships are pursued. There are two types of teams right now, teams that are trying to win something and teams that are trying to spoil it for everyone else. This is the College Game Day podcast for Halloween Day. I guess some pretenders will be unmasked. You'll be able to hear it throughout the weekend. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Stanford Steve here, reminding you that we would appreciate it deeply if you would subscribe to the College Game Day podcast. That way you never miss an episode, or you can download it wherever you prefer to get your podcast. Gentlemen, the Texas A&M comeback / LSU meltdown kept me from having a perfect week last week and instead ensured that the two of you had perfect 7-0 weeks. So congratulations on that. We're not talking about the games of chance that people like to play. I'm not sure how we might have fared against the number, but overall, we pick winners here. So let's start with where College Game Day is going to be on Saturday morning back in Happy Valley, Ohio State and Penn State. You know the travails that James Franklin and the Nittany Lions have had against top 5 competition, and you also know the problems that Ryan Day and Ohio State have had against teams that have started 7-0 or better, although of those 0-5 of those 5 losses, 3 of them under Day came in the college football playoff. So I do think that you put a little asterisk by that, and Ohio State doesn't quite have the mental hurdle that Penn State is facing in a game like this. Ohio State has won more games of this magnitude than the Nittany Lions have, at least in recent years. So, Pete, I'll start with you. Who's going to win the game in Happy Valley on Saturday at high noon?
Well, I think the fairest way to kind of characterize this, Rece, because these are first world problems these fan bases are facing, is that each of them are waiting for a big game breakthrough and haven't had one in, very, very recent history. So that said, just the confluence of circumstances between the environment, between Penn State's roster, and between Ohio State's uncertain offensive line, I got to take Penn State in this game. I really feel like Andy Kotelnicki has done a great job getting that offense to a little more modern college football offense. I expect Drew Aller to play. We'll see as the week goes on here, how that ends up manifesting itself. He could be a little bit limited. Obviously, he left that Wisconsin game at halftime. He's dealing with a left knee injury. But I just think the confluence of environment, the difficulties of the offensive line, and Penn State's offensive evolution under Kotelnicki give them an advantage here. If Ohio State can't win the line of scrimmage, it's difficult for me to see them figuring out a way to win.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Pete. There's a lot going on here. Rece, also, Ryan Day beat Penn State last year when they were 6-0. So there's that 7-0 number.
There's yet another asterisk.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And but no, the things are real. Watching the Ohio State game last week, I mean, the backup that came in for Simmons did not get off to a good start. He gets carted off. And for Ryan Day to start his press conference with mentioning how they have to run the ball, I think he's pretty adamant in that. And those minds on that side, I feel like they will get creative in that way. I do think it's a monster, I don't know if it's advantage, but maybe a feather in the cap for Ohio State that they played in an environment at Autzen, staying for that game. Like, it was as wild as it was, and they were there step for step. And that's why I keep thinking, what's a tougher gig? Was it Oregon and Autzen and Penn State in Happy Valley? That's the notion it comes down to, and what Ohio State has battled through, and everything points to Penn State. The comeback win, Ohio State looking like poop last week at home off a bye. So I'm going to say Ohio State wins by a field goal. Those interested, the 3.5, I would take Penn State.
We've mentioned this on the Wednesday edition of the podcast, and rare does an offensive lineman get this much attention. We gave credit where credit is due to Jason Starrett, one of the excellent data analysis guys who former stats and information guy with us, working with one of the data services with True Media. When Josh Simmons has not been on the field against Power 4 opponents this year, Ohio State hasn't done anything running the football. And the number of snaps is almost evenly split, a few more with him on prior to his injury. They're averaging half a yard per carry before contact. That's now more than 3 yards per rush than when he's on the field. They haven't rushed for a touchdown. Everything points there. And I feel like if not now, when for Penn State, if they're not going to win this game against an Ohio State team that has some issues on the offensive line, when are you ever going to win this game?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I just think, well, maybe Ohio State's just going to throw it to 4. Maybe they're just going to throw it to Jeremiah Smith and they'll protect him just long enough. And for all of the things that Penn State has done to modernize its offense, and I love it all, and I think Penn State's still going to make the playoff. So this won't be complete disaster as it has been in years past for the loser of this game, either one. But I've been leaning Penn State all week, but I think in games like this, you go with your gut. And my gut still tells me that Ohio State thinks it can beat Penn State, that they've got a few more explosive weapons. Games like this often decided by explosive plays. So even with that great Penn State defense, which I know can cause a lot of explosive plays defensively with negative plays for the offense, I'm going to go Ohio State. I'm going to say that the Buckeyes overall superior talent, one of the two to three most talented rosters in the sport. I'll say they get it done, and I'll say that the Buckeyes go into Happy Valley, win again. Penn State still firmly in the playoff picture, and both teams ultimately will make the college football playoff. Couple of teams that are unbeaten in ACC play. Pittsburgh and SMU both coming off the weirdest wins I've seen recently for either team. Pitt got 75 pick sixes against Syracuse and won 1,000-12. And then SMU turned the ball over 17 times against Duke, didn't get a single turnover, blocked a field goal at the end of regulation, stopped a 2-point conversion, and won by 1. And yet here they are, Steve, both sitting there, at least in the conference. Pitt's unbeaten overall, and SMU sitting there unbeaten in ACC play. What do you think happens?
Yeah, both coming in, as you described, different ways. Fascinating matchup. Really happy for players on these programs to get this chance playing a ranked versus ranked game in November, which is always exciting. Pitt extra days off. Word was Coach Dew's not known for it, but gave him the whole weekend off. I'm sure he didn't take the whole weekend off, but we know how he is wired. I can't imagine how fired up they are to go on the road. Yeah, SMU's pretty crazy because their defense, I thought, bailed them out last week. The blocked field goal was incredible. Jennings has been the man since Rep put him in as a starting position, but Pitt's offense, still with the diversity that they've had, is got to be among the most improved units in the country when you're looking at Power 4 teams and what they were, and that's a credit to Dew's making the adjustment and going against what he stands for. I'm going to say SMU wins, but I think that, again, I think it's a field goal touchdown game. The number's ticked over 7. It's 7.5 now. So I'd say SMU wins, but Pitt keeps it close.
For those investing in the game, I would wait to see how the quarterback situation play out. It's a rare game where both quarterbacks are in flux as moment of taping here. Kevin Jennings, who's done a great job for SMU, is questionable in this game, according to Rhett Lashley. And then Pat Narduzzi gave Eli Holstein a wait and see after his head hit the turf in that Syracuse game. Having to make a pick with a little bit of ambiguity there, I'm going to take SMU. And the reason I'm going to do it is give Rhett Lashley a lot of credit for this. He did an offseason study about teams that jumped up leagues. And the places where they noticed the biggest difference when he talked to like the Cincinnatis who did it over the years, BYU, Houston, etc., was line depth on both sides of the line. So they went out and 13 of their 20 portal guys were linemen of some kind. And when I look at them now, they have the 5th-ranked rush defense in the country, 88.4 points per game, which is a pretty remarkable number. And they have the number 23 rush offense at 200 yards a game. So clearly, where Lashley fortified has paid dividends for SMU and has allowed for a smooth transition. I think they make it happen here. I really hope, last thing here, guys, is that Dallas is alive, right? Like SMU has generated buzz. They've jumped up leagues. Rece, I'm sure you've called games there over on Thursday over the years. Not exactly an electric environment, right? Right. So I hope that this game becomes a little bit of a spark for them to resonate in Dallas?
I'm going with Pitt. Now, I don't think that SMU is going to put the ball on the ground the way it did against Duke, but it's not as if that were some type of aberration. The Mustangs have lost 10 fumbles this year, second most in the country. Now, there were 3 of them against Duke, but they balanced that out with 3 interceptions. So, and they actually fumbled 6 times and lost 3 of them. So, okay, you're fixated on that. Everybody gets, the 5 points of pressure, and that football must be riveted to your rib cage, as Bill Curry used to say. So SMU is not going to fumble it as much as they did against Duke, but they have been loose with the ball all year. Both teams have backup quarterbacks who've played. In SMU's case, they've played a lot. But with the fact that Pitt's in the top 15 in the country in turnover margin, that their defense is playing with incredible confidence, that they've got a quarterback, even if Holstein can't play, who has played and many believed was going to win the job in fall camp against Holstein. I'm going to say that Pittsburgh remains undefeated. Now, this is a step up. Pitt's strength of schedule up to this point in the season is 101st. Their remaining strength of schedule is among the 25 toughest in the country. Pitt has Clemson coming up. If SMU wins, we still have the possibility of the 3-way undefeated in conference play tie atop the ACC, and we get down to like the 5th tiebreaker or some such thing. So this will be an entertaining game. I'm going to take Pitt, and I think especially if you like to play games of chance that you should take Pitt and the points. In beautiful Jacksonville, Duval, the world's largest outdoor mocktail party, because the Gators have got to start playing better before it becomes the other anymore, although the Gator play at some time has turned some of their fans to much harder drink than mocktails. Florida and Georgia, Gators are about to go on a closing stretch that's just brutal. It starts with the Dogs. Georgia, after that Texas win, kind of feeling itself. Pete, what do you think? Does Florida have any type of puncher's chance against the Dogs in this rivalry game?
I don't believe so, Rece. I think we saw the full-throated Georgia defensive line in that Texas game. And it's just hard to imagine if we see that again. And by all accounts, all those gentlemen are going to be back lining up, chasing DJ Lagway around. I just don't see Florida having the ability to move the ball against this Georgia defense that's kind of finally firing on all cylinders. So there's a desperation to Florida that shouldn't be underestimated. This is a save your job game for Billy Napier. This is a save your season game for the program. It's, like motivation's a huge factor in college football. So they're going to sort of dust up every ember of desperation for this game at Florida. But right now it's hard to envision anything but Georgia cruising.
I so wish Graham Mertz was healthy for this game, knowing what's at stake for Florida. And just for the kid's sake of being able to go at this Georgia defense and show what he has one last time. It's just a shame. And that's what it comes down to for me in this game is Lagway. Has shown flashes, arm strength, athletic ability. I mean, everything. He's got the goods. But now you talk about this caged animal group that's coming in for Georgia that we saw last time out in Austin that was just sensational. Florida's defense, I'm really interested in this one because Carson Beck, I was going through some of the numbers, guys. Touchdown to interception ratio in SEC play with the namesake we have at the quarterback position, it's not pretty in this conference when you look at those two things in conference play. So, I mean, Carson Beck, I think it's 8-8, Carson Beck in SEC play. So he's got to be better. Everyone there is just waiting for him to take that step. There's been thoughts back and forth about the receivers. They had the suspension of the running back position early on in the year. We saw a glimpse of it last time out with fortunate field possession because of their defense. But I'll take Georgia. I would be interested here though if Florida could keep it inside the number. Georgia has not been good as a big favorite. I think it's 0-4 as a 14-point favorite this year. So plenty at stake for Florida. I just would love to see a competitive game. This game has always been good, obviously with the rivalry. So Georgia wins. I would think Florida could keep it closer than 16.5.
You've got Trevor Etienne crossing sides of the field. The former Gator running back is now the Dogs' leading rusher, coming off a 3-touchdown game against Texas. Beck, that you mentioned, already has more turnovers than he did all of last season. Georgia trying to beat Florida for the 4th straight time, something they haven't done since a 6-game run from 1978 to 1983. Georgia's last loss to someone not named Alabama was 2020 to Florida. Since that moment, 51-0 against everyone else in the span. But this is a rivalry game. And a stroll down memory lane takes me back to a very similar situation, 2002. The Gators stumbled into the game behind the embattled already early in his tenure Ron Zook, 5-3. Fans were restless, unranked. And somehow, some way, the Gators reached deep down in their soul and they beat the Dogs 20-13. And not only was that satisfying to them, because Georgia did go on to win the SEC that year, but that game ultimately knocked them out of the BCS National Championship game. Maybe, somehow, some way, Florida has one more spoiler for the Dogs in store in Jacksonville on Saturday afternoon. Not a chance. Dogs, big, roll, easily.
This is a good memory.
Florida will probably jump on them. Maybe they'll stay inside the number. Convincing win for the Dogs. Big game in the SEC Saturday night. Texas A&M, real program, rough, tough, Aggie stuff. I think I got the lyrics a little bit wrong there, but I'll figure that out. But we know Mike Elko, he's no fast-talking politician. He's got a real program going on down there. I love it when coaches say things that give me a gift that I can ride for 2 or 3 weeks right there just to have a little fun with. But all kidding aside, they do have a real program. And they've got, this dude's an elite coach, done a marvelous job already with Texas A&M. But now you've got to come down off that emotional high, and you've got to go into a place that's very difficult to play in South Carolina, and they've got a better team than their record has shown. And they also have a history there over the last couple of years, most notably 2 years ago against Tennessee, of ruining things for people. It won't ruin everything for the Aggies if they were to lose this game, but I think they've got their hands full. Pete, I don't remember who started last time. Pete, you got to start here. A&M, South Carolina, who do you like?
So this game will not be an offensive spectacle. There will be a lot of NFL scouts on this game because the defensive line talent is a collection of creatures, and that is where games are won. That is a coveted position, obviously, by the NFL. And there are some rare birds that are going to be rolling on those D lines in this game. Each team has struggled with some offensive consistency, and I don't expect that to change at all here. It's hard for me to kind of go against the Elko magic karma. He's pulled every lever right so far here, and I think he'll play both quarterbacks. That's just an intuition, and it's a little bit of a necessity, really. I think that depending on, does South Carolina's tandem of edges negate somewhat what Marcel Reed can do? That's the question here. And that's what I think they have to decide internally there. That said, there's been too much good juju out of A&M to go against them here. So I think they figure out a way to win a slog like 13-10.
Yeah, this is get a win at any cost, no matter what it looks like, Pete. You nailed it there. And it's interesting. This place has been wild as a night game. What do we got here? When I see South Carolina's 5-1 against the spread versus AP top 10 teams since 21, that's pretty good for that building. And when you look at that matchup, you nailed it, Pete. Both guys love what they have on the defensive side of the ball. I bring it up every week, but what Elko's done with this quarterback position, putting the onus of strain on the opposing defensive coordinator, I think is fascinating. When you look at what South Carolina brings to the table, they've been more tested. They've gone and played in tougher places, and that's what gets me to here. This is A&M's biggest challenge. They went on the road to play Florida, weird game with it all being the weather delay and that stuff. How much can you rely on your defensive line? I'm going to take South Carolina. I just feel like this is a moment. It's tough because I trust Elko more than I do Shane Beamer. But everything points, like Rece pointed out, the momentum that A&M has, and now going into that building, I feel like South Carolina could give them fits. I'll take the upset.
I'm with you, Steve. I'm taking the upset also. Look, I think A&M's really, really good.
Yeah.
What they've done is remarkable. Elko has been brilliant in handling the quarterback situation. Defense has been good. Texas A&M hasn't turned the football over this year, and South Carolina leads the nation in forced fumbles. South Carolina's done a great job against running quarterbacks, most notably Jalen Milroe, although Jackson Dart had a little more success. But that was, that is the one thing in that stadium that gives you pause that Ole Miss went in there and gave it to them. But I think that, I do think that Ole Miss probably a little more explosive offensively than Texas A&M. So night game, this is the kind of game I mentioned earlier in the week on the podcast that everybody outside the Elite Four, has found a way to lose a game just like this one. I'm sure A&M will be aware of that, but I'm going to go with Cocky to pull the upset as well. Steve, another game it's sort of a do or die game for Ole Miss in terms of its college football playoff hopes. They go into Arkansas. Speaking of places that have pulled upsets this year, with the Hogs taking down Tennessee earlier. Now Ole Miss goes in already 2 losses. You have another one, and you can forget about making the playoff. And then Georgia coming next week. Defining 2 weeks of the season for Ole Miss, but next week won't mean much other than an upset opportunity if they can't get out of Fayetteville with a win. What do you think happens there?
I'm going to pick the upset. Just watching Ole Miss's offense, Jackson Dart still gets hit too much. I thought Arkansas was brilliant in mirroring what Oklahoma did to the Tennessee offense, thus getting that upset against that win. Jackson Dart still is a phenomenal talent. 15 touchdowns, 3 picks on the year as a whole. Anything on Tre Harris, Pete? Because he's kind of a big deal, I would think, in this game.
He's a huge deal in this game. He is, I think, it'd be considered questionable as of now, Steve, and I think it's going to be a late week decision. So I would think we get some clarity on that on Friday afternoon, and certainly something we'll be talking about on game day on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I look at what Taven's done. Also, one of the best pickups, I think, in the portal. When you talk about how important quarterbacks are. His good, I would put up against anyone in that conference. And, Ole Miss, everybody still has, this idea of Lane, scoring a ton of points and they're going back and forth games. They've been slowing the pace. Their games have been lower scoring. I think he really likes what he has on the defensive side. Going back and watching that, I thought that was just more of Oklahoma not knowing what they're doing up front, which is crazy because Bill Bedenbaugh is one of the highest ranked offensive line guys when you talk to anybody, scouts, coaches, whoever. And just to see that mixture is mind-boggling to me. But yeah, Arkansas at home on the field wins the game Saturday.
It's weird that Ole Miss almost seems like I'm picking an upset, right? Just considering what they were. I talked to a scout who went through there in August, and he said they had 18 guys that were either going to be combine or priority free agents. That's a number that is like a national title contender number. So the talent there is the talent. There's no mistaking it. I just think it has to come together at some point. I agree with you, Steve. Tre Harris is going to be a huge factor. He's a lot of their identity. I believe he's still the nation's leading receiver. Even though he missed he missed last week. He's got 985 yards or something just insane in that state. But I just think Ole Miss has to turn the ignition at some point, because if they don't do it here, it's going to be a long old slog home. You got Georgia, you got to go to Gainesville still. There's nothing easy. And I tell you what, Mississippi State is no walkover. I know the record doesn't show it, but they've given some very good teams fits, and they got a young quarterback who's getting better. So this is a little bit of a referendum game for Ole Miss as a contender and beyond. And if they fall in the trapdoor in Fayetteville, they could fall for a while.
the situation is not dissimilar from the game we just talked about at South Carolina. Tough place to play. You have, have a history of an upset, but you have, in Arkansas's case, they got Tennessee and then had another opportunity against LSU and got rolled. I think as important as Tre Harris is, as important as it is to keep Jackson Dart from getting hit, the Ole Miss defense has been consistent. I mean,
Yes.
they played plenty well enough to win both of the games they lost. I'm going to ride with the Rebel defense, and I'm going to say that Ole Miss wins the game, stays alive, stays in contention for that playoff spot for at least one more week, and then sets up the showdown against Georgia.
And Lane stays in contention for the Florida job. Is that part of it too?
And then maybe the question becomes, how well does Florida play? Does the job actually open? Unless you've got news of breaking
lock and swing this weekend.
yeah, that's no question about it. Would seem to be an easy game to pick on the surface, but I'll go back to the theme, trying to avoid stepping on the rake, hitting yourself in the face, and losing games the way a lot of teams have when they've least expected it. Michigan State coming off another loss to Michigan. They had a little fight at the end. Jonathan Smith trying to get things started in his first year of the program. The exact opposite of that is Curt Cignetti has things rolling. Now, Indiana, college game day there, navigated it beautifully, played with the backup quarterback. Maybe Curtis Rourke gets back. But I sensed, Pete, some, not that they were looking ahead. I don't want to suggest that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But when you could get any of the staff to talk big picture, Michigan State, they were wary of how that might be a letdown moment for the unbeaten Hoosiers. What do you think happens in East Lansing?
Well, I'm going to give you some penetrating analysis here, Rece. In order to lose a game, you have to trail. And Indiana has yet to trail, and we're at Halloween. So until they trail, I am going to back Indiana. I will recalibrate my analysis until they are behind on the scoreboard in a football game. The one thing from being around that program for a couple of days there, Rece, and obviously watching that Washington game is just the collective soundness of their experienced and veteran roster. And I think Michigan State, obviously, their offense has kind of come in fits and starts this year. Aiden Childs is dripping with talent. He's had some of the inconsistencies of a young quarterback, right? So I just think when you see an Indiana defense that's top 5 in total defense, top 5 in rushing defense, top 25 in passing yards. Now look, these teams have been behind on them, so they're going to be throwing the ball. They're top 10 scoring defense. I just feel like that's going to be a lot for Michigan State to overcome in this game. So I will stick with the Hoosiers, with very likely Curtis Rourke back slinging it on Saturday.
All right. The people by chance, Rece, love Indiana because those people are undefeated when games they've taken Indiana, as they are 7-0 against the number. Over the total is also 7-0. Wow. Looking at their games. You brought up Childs, Pete. Going back and watching them, it was right there. It was there for the taking, and they just couldn't do it against Michigan, which I thought it would have been I know Michigan's not Michigan, but just for Jonathan as he tries to build this thing, that would have been huge. Had the ball late and couldn't get it done. Childs has been better. He plays. Going back and watching Cam Ward, his days at Incarnate Word and his first year at Wazoo, I see a lot of that. It's not, having ball security awareness, but he's gotten better. It's only 2 picks in his last 4 games. This will be huge. And what do we got? 3:30 or night game? 3:30. So East Lansing will be ready. They pride themselves on having a good atmosphere for this kind of game. Toughest game to Indiana's schedule so far this year. I do believe Indiana has enough, but those looking at the number, I like Michigan State plus the points. You're getting over a touchdown in this game. Indiana wins, Michigan State covers.
Just because I'm going to go off script here and mess up our producers a little bit, because as we talk about Michigan State, I feel the need to at least address the number 1 team in the country playing the all-time wins leader. So just give me a real quick pick. Obviously, Oregon's better than Michigan. There's question about the status of Will Johnson, who Pete knows I believe to be the best corner in the country and one of the best players in the country. Any chance of an upset here? I'll go ahead and say no. I think Oregon rolls and takes care of business. Steve, what do you think, Oregon, Michigan?
I love Oregon. What they have. This is the second largest underdog role Michigan's been since 1978 at home. Like, that just tells you what everyone thinks of it. It hasn't been pretty. Gutted out a win against Sparty last week, but Oregon's got too much. Oregon's defense, I think, will keep them in this game if the offense sputters a little bit early on.
I can't see Davis Warren like having a breakout here, and Oregon's defense is going to annihilate a one-dimensional team.
Friday night, Boise State, San Diego State. Ashton Jeanty and the Broncos kept the Heisman train on the tracks, not to mention the inside position to be the highest ranked, or one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions and make the college football playoff. Of course, they would still have to win a conference championship game should they get there. Boise State and San Diego State, Pete, Friday night. What do you think?
Well, I give San Diego State some credit. It started off pretty rocky for Sean Lewis there, and they have gotten better. They are undefeated in Mountain West play. They played a great game against Washington State. It came up short. They're starting a true freshman at quarterback, and Danny O'Neill, who's from Indianapolis. He's a former Colorado commitment from when Sean Lewis was the OC there. Again, wins over Hawaii and in Wyoming aren't exactly going to hang any banners for you in San Diego State, but they are starting to find some sink and flow, which is an important part of that Sean Lewis offense. So that said, I ain't picking against Ashton Jeanty. I was told this week he's healthy. He'd banged up his elbow a little bit in that UNLV game. So, but it could be a little bit of a test. It's a very different game at this juncture of the schedule. They play so unique in that old Baylor offense.
Yeah, I'm interested to see here with Boise and Jeanty. You touched on he's fine, he's healthy. His carries are starting to add up though. Probably his worst. I think it was definitely his worst yards per carry game last week as they were force feeding him against UNLV. And ended up going over 100, but I think it was 33 carries. I would think they would want to get him out. I mean, he rested the second half. What was that? Back against Utah State or Hawaii, maybe? I forgot what it was. But yeah, San Diego State's always tricky. It is on the blue. I look at Boise State winning this game. Not sure about the number. It's a lot of points for Sean Lewis, who I think of as a good offensive mind. So Boise State, get Jeanty out of there healthy, get his stats, and go home.
Over the course of the season, San Diego State's rush defense hasn't been great towards the bottom of the country, and some of those stats probably even helped by some of the styles of offense they've faced, where a couple of teams haven't really attempted to run the ball a whole lot against them. So I'm going to go Boise State as well. I think the Broncos keep rolling, although I think that was a valiant effort against what I believe to be a really good Washington State team.
Yeah, they're up 12 to start the fourth quarter.
Yeah, San Diego State had a chance there and couldn't quite close the deal. All right, deep cut game I think is a lot of fun because of the connection. Vanderbilt at Auburn. Now, the Vanderbilt-Auburn game last year had one of the remarkable butterfly effects in college football because Auburn handled Vanderbilt with very little trouble. A couple of weeks later, New Mexico State went into Auburn and handed it to them. 31-10, I think, was the final score. Diego Pavia, the start of the legend, at least through the broader scope of college football, started that day in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And it caught the attention of Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee, who wondered how New Mexico State could go in and do that to Auburn after Auburn had just done it to his SEC squad. As you know, Diego Pavia went to Vanderbilt. The head coach, Jerry Kill, went to Vanderbilt. The offensive coordinator, Tim Beck, went to Vanderbilt. And now Vanderbilt has beaten Alabama and gave Texas a fight to the very last second last week. But it's not just that game with Diego Pavia and Auburn head coach Hugh Freeze. The year before, or previously, Diego Pavia had led New Mexico State to a win over Liberty. And Pavia, I think, has put like almost 600 yards and 6 touchdowns on Hugh Freeze, leading Hugh to say, I've seen enough of that quarterback. I'm sick of him, which I don't blame him for saying. How sick will he be at the end of Saturday at the loveliest village on the plains when the Doors come calling with their New Mexico State influx of talent. Steve?
It's funny. The way people talk about Vanderbilt, I just feel like they haven't watched them. Like they're an ultimate pain in the butt to play. Defensively, they don't have the best guys, but they've done a good job. I mean, against Texas in that offense, got themselves to hang in that game. A 10-point game in the second half. Diego got flustered on one, and I heard some people categorize it as a fadeaway jump shot throw. But he's always going to play like that. He's in it. And this line, I mean, for me to feel like Auburn, who is the ultimate wild card. I always say with Auburn, you never know what you're getting week to week for years, no matter who the coach is, not knowing anything against Hugh at all. But that idea, I still think Vanderbilt's a solid football team. I mean, what they put on tape is better in a week-to-week scenario than Auburn. And I look at Vanderbilt still trying to get that 6th win. It's an early game. It's not a night game where that place could get all into a frenzy. And Diego's not afraid of anything. I think Vanderbilt wins the game.
So my favorite stat about the Liberty game you brought up from 2022, and I think it's worth noting that Liberty was pretty good that year. They were 8.
They were a big favorite too. I think New Mexico State was like a 3-touchdown underdog too.
Yeah.
Monster.
Yeah. That's the last regular season game Liberty lost until Kennesaw beat them last Tuesday, which is a remarkable run and a credit to Jamie Chadwell, who's obviously done a great job replacing Hugh Freeze there. So Auburn is just, again, I chuckled when Steve said they always play crazy games. Nobody's played more crazy games of college football last decade than Gus Malzahn. And you can even say 15 years. That guy is incapable of playing a normal college football game, just simply put. Every game is some sort of wild kick six, comeback, tip. Like in Auburn this year is one of the weirdest anomalies. Going into last week, there were 7 teams that averaged more than 6.5 yards of play on offense and then less than 5 yards of play on defense. And they were Army, Indiana, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Penn State, Texas, all playoff teams, undefeated, one-loss teams, whatever, and Auburn, which means they're perfectly competent on both sides of the ball, yet incapable of winning. Diego Pavia, capable of winning. Not betting against Diego Pavia anymore. So I'm not sure where the line is, but wouldn't that be just a wonderful, wonderful capstone on his career if he could go to the Plains and get Liberty, Auburn again?
It would be shocking. Auburn's a 6.5 point favorite. I see it in this game. And if there is a running back equivalent of Diego Pavia, it's Jarquez Hunter from Auburn. I mean, his performance against Kentucky and just sort of the inability to tackle him. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but you'll see Pavia scrambling around. So, okay, they've got him, and somehow he's still on his feet. Same with Jarquez. Jarquez goes into the line or has a guy, and you say, okay, they've got him. And then he drags the pile for 6 yards with those powerful lower body strength he has, or he slips a guy and runs away from them. I mean, I think Vanderbilt is the play if you're playing a game of chance. Mm-hmm. But coming off the Texas game, really beat up, and Vanderbilt answered the bell really well after, if memory serves, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the week after the Alabama win, Vanderbilt went to Lexington. They won the game. They took care of business. Very similar situation here. I'm going to go Auburn. I think Auburn wins the game. I think it'll be close. Maybe a ball will bounce off a tuba, as has been known to happen, whether it's Malzahn or Hugh Freeze or Gene Chizik or whoever as head coach at Auburn. It's been known to happen there. Maybe a ball bounces around. Maybe the graveyard comes to life. The haunted mansion, on Halloween weekend, sneaks up there and gets the old Commodores. You feel weird betting against Pavia and Vanderbilt, but I think that after what New Mexico State did to them last year, and Pavia even body slamming a guy who intercepted one of his passes and drawing a personal foul, which was, I've never seen that. I don't think a quarterback do that, the former wrestler. I think Auburn is going to be alive for this game. I think they're going to be right on the frenzied edge. Vanderbilt has to be a little bit beaten up after Texas. I'm going to take Auburn. I'm going to say Auburn wins the game against
I
Vanderbilt.
wish we could phone a son here, Rece, and ask old Christopher what he thought of this game. That would be perfect.
Well, we know Rece doesn't pick against Auburn very often because he has to eat at Thanksgiving dinner.
Correct.
So.
You know what I said? What I said last night. This is true. We were watching the World Series last night, and we're recording this on Wednesday morning. I guess I just gave away a secret. So we were watching Game 4 of the World Series last night, and so I'm kind of doing some work at the same time. And I looked over at my wife and said, I said several years ago, I think it was Mississippi State. I can't remember. I said, I picked against Auburn in the Superdog and you got mad at me. She said, no, I didn't. I was just joking. I said, you're a little mad. And I said, Vanderbilt's getting a touchdown. I said, you're going to be really mad if we don't give enough attention to that game in the show and I take Vanderbilt. So you're going to be mad at me when I come home? She said no, because she's a little bit put out with the results that her Tigers have had this year. So I may still go there, but
things could change, though, Rece. Just remember, things could change.
Can I just predict right now that the Iron Bowl is going to
game? I think it's going to be close. What?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to predict right now the Iron Bowl is going to overtime this year. I don't know who's going to win, but that game is going into overtime. Mark it down. Halloween Day, Iron Bowl will be overtime.
Well, at least it's in Tuscaloosa. The games typically, with the exception of the Camback game in 2010, the games in Tuscaloosa typically haven't been weird. It's the ones when they go to Auburn like last year and the one before that. And the one before that. Come to think of it. So we'll see what happens, what ensues on Saturday between Vanderbilt and Auburn. It'll be a big opportunity for Vanderbilt. They can get bowl eligible too. And obviously Auburn is working toward that as well with very little room to spare. Guys, can't wait to see you guys in State College. Going to be a great environment there on Saturday morning. First part of the show outside, and then we'll move inside the stadium for the final moments of College Game Day. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. We ask you to download wherever you prefer to get your podcast or subscribe so you never miss an episode.